The Mayflower arrived in New England on November 11, 1620. The Pilgrims fled the Old World for religious freedom, and they created the Mayflower Compact along the way, which would influence our later founding documents. They also made good friends with the local tribes. Sadly, the following Puritans who arrived in Boston didn't do nearly as well with their relations to the local inhabitants. The battles of Lexington and Concord were the first military engagements of the American Revolutionary War. The battles were fought on April 19, 1775. On September 3, 1783, Great Britain formally recognized the independence of the United States in the Treaty of Paris. At the same time, Britain signed separate peace treaties with France and Spain, which had entered the conflict in 1779, bringing the American Revolution to a close after 8 long years. This was the war that set a people hurtling towards their own destiny for the first time in history as a nation. A nation united for common cause. A common cause spelled out first in the Declaration of Independence and later with the Constitution and Bill of Rights, setting up standards that were simple and noble and often aspirational in implementation. The American Civil War began on April 12, 1861, when Confederate shore batteries under General Pierre G.T. Beauregard opened fire on Union-held Fort Sumter in South Carolina's Charleston Bay. During 34 hours, 50 Confederate guns and mortars launched more than 4,000 rounds at the poorly supplied fort. And on April 13th, U.S. Major Robert Anderson, commander of the Union garrison, surrendered. On June 2nd, 1865, in an event that is generally regarded as marking the end of the Civil War, Confederate General Edmund Kirby Smith, commander of Confederate forces west of the Mississippi, signs the surrender terms offered by Union negotiators. With Smith's surrender, the last Confederate army ceased to exist, bringing a formal end to the bloodiest 4 years in U.S. history. A nation torn apart by a long-standing feud over how much power states should have versus the federal government, and the ability to own human beings as slaves, finally came to a head and unfolded in the bloodiest battles the nation has ever faced. Each new chapter shaping our destiny and solidifying old promises along the way. We don't punish the losers, and we believe all men are created equal, and we are a United States of America. December 7th, 1941, a day that shall live in infamy. The bombing of Pearl Harbor by Japan. On August 14th, 1945, it was announced that Japan had surrendered unconditionally to the Allies, effectively ending World War II. Attacked from without, yet again, but this time on a level we had never faced before. Going from an agrarian people to an industrial nation almost overnight, we did in 4 years what we had never done before and have never even come close since. We threw away all the rules and simply all pulled together to get the job done that had to be done. From building enormous factories that cranked out all things war machine, to people living on ration books and donating everything they could to the war effort. But in the end, America came through, and technology, along with enormous amounts of blood, sweat, and tears, were poured into keeping freedom alive in the world. 1945 to 1991. There was an arms race, a space race, the McCarthy hearings, the Bay of Pigs, the Berlin Wall, October missile crisis, détente, and the fall of the Berlin Wall ended the Cold War in 1991. All of these events had a profound impact on what Americans thought of themselves and what the world thought of them as well. The year 1619 is not listed because it is an irrelevant date in shaping of this country. The reason so few knew that date until it was recently cast in front of so many eyes was because it had no impact whatsoever on shaping who we are as Americans or what we believe. Unlike the other events, where each item shoots out a chain of events that told who we were as Americans and what we stood for. 1619 has never been considered to be one of those moments because, simply put, it wasn't one of those moments. Telling people the sky is green when it is blue doesn't change the color of the sky, and telling people something happened that shaped us all when it did no such thing doesn't make it true either. The nonsense that slavery began with blacks or even ended with blacks in America is both naive and misguided, or more bluntly put, a lie. There were white slaves and there were American Indian slaves, and in all cases, most were sold into slavery by someone who looked a lot like them. That is, whites were captured in Europe by whites and sent to the Americas as slaves. Africans from the West Coast captured inland and Eastern Africans and sold them into slavery, and continue doing such to this very day. And American Indians that were captured by other tribes were also sold into slavery if their luck was up. But more importantly, we chose the name the United States of America for good reason. We had to become united to win our freedom, and we will have to remain united to keep it as well. Dividing the Americas has always been the tool of each of our enemies, who are aware of both divide and conquer and united we stand, divided we fall. Celebrating diversity is the preamble to the fall. Rejoicing in unity is E Pluribus Unum.